Hello, my name is Caroline. Last Christmas, my mother and stepfather raised their glasses to family, then turned around and locked me outside in a snowstorm. He called me a freeloader. She slammed the door. I sat in my frozen car, shaking with fever, staring through their warm windows while they laughed without me. But that wasn't the worst part. They didn't just forget me. They planned it. Slowly, quietly. They drained my bank account, rewrote my father's will, handed my life to someone else in silk gloves. And when I tried to speak up, they told me I was being dramatic. Do you want to know how far a family will go to erase you? And what happens when the forgotten daughter stops being quiet? I stepped into the dining room just as the wind slammed the front door shut behind me. Everyone turned for a brief second, just long enough to register my presence, then went right back to their laughter and wine glasses. The air smelled like glazed ham, sweet potatoes, and something artificial, like too much candle wax from store-bought centerpieces. I hadn't known there would be so many people. The lights sparkled off the glassware in that too-perfect way my mother loved. She had always been about appearances. The centerpiece was a symmetrical mix of silver pine cones and holly berries. Even the napkins were folded into origami stars. Everything looked like a magazine spread, except for me. I wore a dark sweater and jeans, not because I didn't care, but because I wasn't told there'd be guests, much less a photo op. I thought it was just family this year. Apparently, I thought wrong. The only open seat was at the very end of the table, barely within earshot of the conversation, shoved near the swinging kitchen door. And it wasn't a dining chair like the rest. It was a collapsible metal folding one, the kind you'd find in a church basement. No cushion, wobbly legs. As if it had been thrown in at the last second, like me, I pulled it out slowly and sat down. No one noticed. They always said I was too sensitive, I thought, unfolding the napkin on my lap. So, this year, I didn't ask questions. I showed up, I smiled, I even made Mom's old stuffing recipe. Not that anyone noticed. My stepsister, Seraphine, sat across the table in a designer cardigan that probably cost more than my entire winter wardrobe. Her hair was perfectly curled, her nails bright red, and her phone was out, camera tilted at the perfect angle. "Family Christmas," she giggled, typing out her caption. #blessed. She didn't even glance in my direction. I wasn't in the frame. Not that I expected to be. The carving knife was passed right over my head to someone else. When I reached for bread, someone's elbow blocked my hand. And when I cleared my throat to ask if anyone wanted more stuffing, the one thing I had actually contributed, no one answered. Toasts began. Isolde, my mother, stood with her wine glass raised. She looked radiant, no doubt thanks to her Botox budget and Darius's latest bonus. To Darius, she declared, her voice bright, for bringing structure, elegance, and direction into our lives. This home, this family, wouldn't be the same without him. I tried not to react, just kept my smile in place, hands folded tight under the table. Darius lifted his glass, nodded with that smug charm he wore like cologne. Well, it's easy to lead when you have a family that follows. I fidgeted in my chair, my fork scraped against the plate. No one looked my way. Seraphine leaned over to one of her influencer friends and whispered something that made them both snort laugh. I had a feeling it was about me. A relative, some cousin of Darius's, I think, asked Seraphine if she was really getting a new car for New Year's. She beamed. A Range Rover. Dad says it's time I leveled up. Darius grinned. She deserves it. Always so responsible. I wanted to scream. Instead, I bit down on my tongue. I tried, once, to interject. I made the apple. Isolde waved a dismissive hand. Let Seraphine speak, darling. Of course. That's when Darius stood up again, holding his wine like a prop in a stage play. Here's to families who pull their weight, he said, looking directly across the table. But not at me. Not exactly. Just close enough for everyone to understand who he meant. This house isn't for freeloaders. A few chuckles broke out. One person raised their brow. Isolde. She sipped her wine. Seraphine smirked behind her glass. I froze. The words echoed so loudly in my ears, it was like everything else had gone mute. Freeloader. I had worked 3 part-time jobs last year, cared for my father while he was dying, and dropped everything to be there when Mom needed help settling the estate. But none of that mattered. Not here. Not to them. My cheeks flushed, but I didn't cry. I wouldn't give them that. I placed my fork down gently, folded my napkin on the plate, and stood up. No one looked at me. I walked slowly toward the hallway, grabbed my coat from the hook by the door. My shoes were still wet from earlier, but I slid them on without a word. The front door creaked when I opened it. The cold hit hard, like reality. I stepped out onto the porch and shut the door behind me. The wind howled. Snow swirled in small, angry flurries across the front lawn. The windows glowed golden from the inside, flickering with warmth. I wasn't welcome in. I pulled the coat tighter around me and stood there a moment longer, trying to catch my breath. I waited, just in case. Maybe someone would realize I left. Maybe Mom would come check. Maybe Seraphine would pretend to care. No one came. No one noticed. I stood there as long as I could, and when the cold started to creep under my collar, I looked back through the window. Seraphine was already taking another photo. Darius was laughing. My mother was topping off her own wine. That was the moment it finally clicked, the second where everything hardened inside me, not with rage, but with truth. They weren't just being careless, they wanted me invisible. I turned away from the window and stepped off the porch. It's strange, the way sound changes in the snow. Everything gets quieter, but sharper. My footsteps made these little crunches as I walked down the steps, crisp, deliberate, like I was trying not to wake something I couldn't see. The porch light flickered above me, casting a warm cone of light that didn't reach far into the freezing darkness. I stood there for a second, just long enough to think, maybe I was overreacting. Maybe someone didn't know I'd stepped outside. Maybe, just maybe, if I went back in, this whole evening could still be salvageable. I turned and reached for the door handle, locked. At first, I just blinked at it. Then I tested it again, more deliberately. It didn't budge. I knocked lightly with the side of my fist. Nothing. So I knocked harder. Still nothing. The wind pushed my hair into my face. I tucked it behind my ear with a hand that was already starting to ache from the cold. One more knock, this time a full-on rap of my knuckles. Finally, footsteps. The door creaked open just a few inches. It was Darius. He didn't look surprised to see me. Didn't ask why I was out there. Didn't even act like it was odd I had left the table during Christmas dinner. Instead, he gave me a look that said he was tired of this, of me. And then he said it, like he'd been waiting for the moment. Go sleep it off, and take your drama somewhere else. And then, just like that, the door clicked shut again. The wind howled a little louder as if it had been waiting for its cue. For a full 5 seconds, I didn't move. My brain didn't want to catch up to what just happened. I stared at the door I grew up opening every day after school, the one my father had painted red because Mom once said it looked inviting. That door used to mean safety. Now, it was nothing but a line I'd been pushed behind. I walked down the front steps in slow motion. The snow had gotten deeper, up past my ankles now, and I could already feel the wet starting to seep through my socks. My fingers burned from the cold, the kind of sting that promises worse pain is coming. The wind whipped at my face as I made my way toward my car, parked halfway down the block since Seraphine's brand new SUV and her friends' cars had filled the driveway. By the time I got to the Subaru, my nose was running and my eyes were watering. Not from crying, just from sheer exposure. I climbed into the back seat and slammed the door shut behind me, trying to trap what little warmth remained inside. The air was stale, thick with old takeout bags and coffee cups I hadn't cleaned out in weeks. I reached into the glove compartment, pulled out a blanket that barely covered my legs, and wrapped myself in it. Not that it did much. My teeth were chattering. I turned the ignition, hoping, praying. The car sputtered. Then again. Finally, the engine caught with a rough hum. The vents blew out a whisper of lukewarm air. It wasn't going to last long. The gas light blinked, and I knew I didn't have more than maybe 30-40 minutes of heat. I plugged in my phone, 7% battery left, no charger in the car. Of course, because tonight wasn't done making a point. I scrolled through my messages anyway. There weren't many. A couple from my college roommate from 2 years ago, someone who probably wouldn't answer if I called. Some old group chats that had long since gone quiet. Nothing from Mom. Nothing from anyone inside that house. No one was looking for me. I curled deeper into the blanket, pulled my coat tighter around me, and leaned my head back against the seat. Outside, the snow kept falling, silent and steady, like it had a job to do. It felt familiar, this kind of silence, the kind that isn't peaceful, the kind that feels like you've been erased from your own life. I watched the frost creep along the inside of the windshield, watched my breath puff out like smoke. My fingers moved on their own. I opened the camera and snapped a photo. Just a quick one, me in the dark, cheeks red, nose raw, wrapped in a sad excuse for warmth. I didn't take it for attention. I took it so that I wouldn't forget this feeling, so I'd never again let someone tell me it didn't happen. The cold started to settle into my bones. I flexed my toes, but they barely responded. I tried turning the vents up, but the air was already cooling down again. Not enough fuel. I shut off the engine. Everything went quiet. I thought about the first Christmas after Dad died, how Mom had refused to use any of his ornaments, said it was too soon. I remembered how she donated all his coats, except for the red wool one he used to wrap me in after sledding. That one had mysteriously gone missing when she remodeled my room the next spring. Isolde didn't like reminders, and tonight I'd finally become one too many. My eyes were getting heavy. My fingers had stopped hurting. They'd gone numb instead. I looked at my phone one last time. 3% battery. I opened notes, typed out one sentence. If I disappear tonight, tell the truth. I wasn't planning anything dramatic. I wasn't trying to scare anyone. It was just insurance, just in case. The last thing I heard before I finally slipped into something between sleep and unconsciousness wasn't a siren or a phone ringing. It was Darius's voice, crystal clear in my head. This house isn't for freeloaders. And maybe it wasn't. Maybe I wasn't a part of that house anymore. But I wasn't done. Not yet. When I opened my eyes again, everything outside the car had turned white. The windshield was buried in a soft, thick blanket of snow, only a narrow slit remaining clear where the defroster had fought its losing battle. I sat up slowly, stiff and shivering, a dull ache behind my eyes like I'd been crying in my sleep. Except I hadn't cried. Not a single tear. The car was ice cold again. My breath came out in visible puffs. I fumbled with my coat, pulling it tighter, then shoved my hands under my thighs for warmth. The engine was off now. I must have turned it off at some point to save gas. Or maybe it had sputtered out on its own. I didn't even remember closing my eyes. That frightened me more than anything else. I blinked a few times, forcing myself to stay alert, and then reached over to the glove compartment. Somewhere in there was a half-crushed granola bar and a backup charger I hadn't used in months. My fingers were so numb I could barely grip it, but I managed to plug it in and connect my phone. 2% battery. Just enough. I tapped the screen and the lock screen lit up, cold blue light piercing the dim cabin. The time read 8:47 p.m. I'd been out here for over an hour. I hesitated for a beat, then opened Instagram. Part of me didn't want to, but something heavier than curiosity pushed me forward, a need to confirm what I already knew. The way people check an empty room twice, just to feel worse. There it was, Seraphine's latest post, just 15 minutes old. A perfectly lit photo of the entire dining room, twinkling lights and all. Isolde in her cream sweater, smiling with one hand delicately resting on Darius's arm. Seraphine in the center, holding a wine glass, laughing like she'd never known disappointment. Even that awful neighbor with the yappy dog was there, seated at the end of the table. Everyone was in the shot. Except me. The caption read, "Couldn't have asked for a more perfect family night. Bag. Family. First. Christmas magic." Perfect. That word hit harder than the wind. I stared at the screen, my hands shaking, not from the cold, but from something deeper, something meaner. It wasn't just that they hadn't looked for me. It was that they were fine without me, thriving even, laughing, celebrating, crafting memories they knew I wasn't part of and documenting them proudly. They didn't forget me. They erased me, deliberately, cleanly. like I'd been smudged out of a photo frame and replaced with glitter and fake laughter. I saved the post. Then I downloaded it again. I wasn't sure why. Maybe for proof. Maybe because some part of me knew this would be important later, not just emotionally, but practically. There's power in documentation, evidence, receipts. My battery dipped to 1%. I let the screen go dark. From the house, music swelled, a Christmas classic, too cheerful for the occasion. Then, faint but unmistakable, came the sound of laughter. Not distant, but loud, direct, as if someone had turned up the volume on purpose. It was calculated. Someone inside wanted me to hear them. I shifted in my seat and angled toward the window, wiping away a thin line of fog with my sleeve. Through the sliver of visible glass, I could make out Seraphine twirling in the living room, her arms raised like she was on stage. Darius was clapping. Isolde held up a flute of champagne. The lights sparkled off the ornaments, casting golden shimmers across their polished hardwood floor. No one glanced outside, not even once. They had forgotten me in a way that didn't come from neglect. It came from intention. I thought back to when I was 8, sitting at that same table next to my dad. He used to carve the turkey like it was a ceremony. He'd always save me the wishbone, told me I could make my own luck if I tried hard enough. Now, I was watching strangers pretend I had never existed. I didn't sob. I didn't scream. The tears didn't come. Instead, I went completely still. There's a different kind of pain when you stop expecting anything at all. It doesn't break you right away. It just carves you hollow from the inside. Quietly. I sat like that for what felt like a long time, the cold creeping up my legs, the sound of muffled celebration growing more unbearable with each passing minute. Then I whispered it to no one. Not perfect. Not anymore. That's when the car light flickered off. My phone finally died. I was left with nothing but silence, snow, and the hum of injustice settling in my chest like smoke. It might have ended there, me frozen in that car like some discarded ornament. But someone else had seen that photo. And they weren't laughing. It was my grandmother. And she wasn't just coming to check in. She was coming for war. I didn't know it then, sitting in that freezing car with nothing but the hum of my own breath, but 2 blocks away, in a smaller house with a sagging porch and a crooked wind chime, my grandmother had already seen the photo. My absence in that glittery, perfect family night post was all the evidence she needed. But before she showed up with wool blankets and fire in her eyes, I sat there, alone, and remembered. Not the kind of memories that make you nostalgic, but the kind that burn your throat before you even open your mouth to speak. My phone had died completely. No signal, no music, no distraction. Only silence and the stinging whisper of memory finding its way in. Earlier that evening, before the wine, before the toast, before I became a ghost in my own mother's home, I was standing near the coat closet, adjusting the zipper on my sweater. I had arrived early. I always did. I thought maybe this year would be different if I tried harder. That's when I heard them. It was Aunt Doreen and her husband Tom. Not really my aunt and uncle, but the titles had stuck from my childhood. They stood just outside the living room archway, voices low but not careful. "She's just like her father," Doreen muttered, her tone clipped, the kind of voice that wraps judgment in a veneer of politeness. "Always the burden no one talks about." Tom let out a snort that sounded like he was trying not to laugh. "Well, at least Darius is trying to clean things up. House looks better. Family looks better." And then the clink of glasses. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. They were just 10 feet away, facing the other direction, speaking like I wasn't real, like I was background noise, something uninvited, inconvenient, furniture. I stepped back into the hallway before they could turn and see me. My hands were shaking, but not from anger, not yet. It was something deeper, like my body was catching up to the reality my heart had been trying to ignore. I'd spent the entire week before Christmas baking. Not fancy cookies, not Instagram-friendly peppermint bark. Just one thing, a pie. Apple cinnamon. My mom's favorite, or at least it used to be. The recipe wasn't printed, it was handwritten, the ink faded, the paper folded at the edges. It was something she used to make with me every December before things shifted, before Darius moved in, before Seraphine started calling her mom in that sugary voice like it had always been hers to use. I bought the ingredients with the last $50 in my checking account. It wasn't much, but it was something I could offer, something real. I wrapped the pie dish in foil, tied a green ribbon around the box, and tucked a note inside. For Mom. Love, Caroline. Simple. I placed it in the fridge that afternoon and didn't say anything. I thought she'd find it and smile. Maybe it would soften something in her. Maybe it would remind her who I was. Later that night, after dinner, but before the insults began, I walked into the kitchen to grab some water. The trash bin was full, the lid open just a crack. I didn't mean to look inside, but I saw the foil, the green ribbon, the note, still taped on. She hadn't even unwrapped it. It hadn't been forgotten. It had been thrown away. Intentionally. Silently. Meanwhile, Seraphine's luxury gift basket, stuffed with lotions and wine and branded chocolates, sat in the center of the living room, admired, praised, photographed. They didn't throw it away out of space, I remember thinking, my fingers clenched around the water glass. They threw it away to make space. That was the moment I knew. I wasn't part of the family anymore. Back in the car, the memory wrapped around me tighter than the blanket ever could. The ache in my chest wasn't the cold. It was humiliation calcifying into something sharper. Not just sadness, not even anger. Resolve. I opened my cracked phone again, praying for just a flicker of life. 2%. Enough. I didn't scroll. I didn't message. I opened the Notes app and typed, "Next year, I will not be outside this house. I will own it." The battery died in my hand. Outside, the snow had slowed, but the silence deepened. The windows of the house still glowed, but they no longer looked warm. They looked staged, fragile, like one gust of truth might shatter everything. I leaned back against the seat, my body trembling less from cold and more from decision. That's when headlights appeared in the rearview mirror. Dim, slow, deliberate. A truck. Grandma's truck. She pulled up beside my car, engine idling. I didn't move. I didn't trust the hope forming in my chest. I thought maybe I was hallucinating. But then I saw the driver's side door swing open. The door slammed, and the next sound was boots crunching through snow. Then fists pounding on my window with an urgency that didn't ask for permission. "Caroline!" Her voice boomed through the storm. "Caroline Quinn, open this damn door before I break the window!" I scrambled up, fingers fumbling with the lock. The moment the door cracked open, she was already yanking it wider. Her face was red, not from cold, but from fury. "You get your behind out of this tin can right now," she said, voice shaking. "What the hell did they do to you?" I couldn't answer. My lips were too frozen to form words. She didn't wait for permission. She pulled me out like a sack of wet laundry, wrapped a wool blanket around me so tight I could barely breathe, and practically carried me into her truck. The heater was on full blast. It smelled like peppermint and old books. She slammed the door, looked me dead in the eyes, and said, "Those people are lucky I didn't bring a shovel." I let out the softest laugh, just enough to let her know I was still here. And as we pulled away from that house, tires crunching over snow-covered asphalt, she reached over, patted my knee, and said, "You're coming home with me." There was no hesitation in her hands, no doubt in her voice. Grandma had decided this story wasn't ending in that car. She held the envelope between her fingers like it was made of glass and handed it to me with a look that didn't need translating. In the quiet corner of her living room, just past midnight, I sat cross-legged under one of her heavy crocheted throws, my fingers still raw, my feet bundled in thick socks that didn't match. Outside, the snow had softened into flurries, but the chill inside my bones hadn't gone anywhere. The radiator hissed in protest, the kettle steamed faintly in the background, and the scent of Vicks lingered in the air like a protective shield. "Your father left this with the lawyer," she said, nodding toward the envelope. "He told me not to open it unless she turned into what she did." My chest tightened. I didn't ask who she meant by she. We both knew. I slid my thumb under the flap and opened it. Inside, folded neatly, were 4 things. The first, a copy of my father's original will, dated a few months before he passed. The second, a hand-signed letter addressed to me in his handwriting, the kind that slanted downward when he got tired. The third, a key, small, brass, taped to a yellow sticky note with the name of a local credit union written in block letters. The fourth, a photo of the 2 of us in front of our old house, just the 2 of us. I was maybe 10, holding a snow shovel like it was a trophy, grinning with 2 missing teeth. He had one arm around my shoulder. The other hand held a thermos. I stared at the picture for longer than I meant to. Then I looked at the will. "Is this real?" I asked quietly. Grandma sat down across from me, pushing her glasses up the bridge of her nose. "It's very real." According to the document, I was to receive the remainder of his personal estate, including a college fund, full ownership of the Subaru, and his 25% stake in Evan's Grill, the small restaurant he had helped fund with Darius before the man turned into a suit with teeth. None of it had been honored. "What happened?" I whispered, even though I already knew. "She didn't just ignore it," Grandma said, her voice sharper now. "She had it overwritten, quietly, with a new one that didn't include you, signed 2 weeks after the wedding. That man, Darius, told her you needed structure, and she let him sell your birthright like it was part of a garage sale." I leaned back on the couch. The living room felt suddenly smaller. "She said I needed to grow up," I muttered, more to myself than anyone else. Grandma didn't smile. "They say that when they want you to give up, there's a difference." She stood and shuffled toward her desk, rummaging through a file cabinet before returning with a thin folder. "I started keeping things," she said, almost apologetically. "Old bank letters, investment reports, enough to notice when things started going missing." She handed it to me. Inside were photocopies of checks, withdrawal slips, and investment summaries. My name was on several of them. Transfers had started 6 months after Dad died. One in particular caught my eye, $18,457, transferred from the Caroline Quinn Education Fund into an entity named Evans Kane Holdings, LLC. The name made my stomach turn. "You saw this and didn't say anything?" I asked, not accusingly, just stunned. "I asked your mother," she said. "She told me it was being restructured for tax efficiency." I didn't believe her, but I knew if I pushed too hard, they'd cut off even what little access I had left to you. I waited. I watched. I collected. The rage I'd been carrying started to simmer in a different direction. It wasn't just pain anymore. It was data. It was receipts. It was something I could use. I set the papers down and looked at her. I want to fight back, but not like them. No screaming, no scenes, just facts, the truth. Her eyes narrowed, proud and fierce. "Now you're speaking your father's language." I exhaled slowly, then asked, "Can I use your laptop?" She nodded and motioned toward the dining table. I pulled the chair out and opened her ancient Dell, the kind that wheezed when it loaded Google. Still, it worked. I logged into my bank account, what I thought was left of it. 0. Not just the college fund, my checking, my savings, my emergency fund. Everything gone. "That was money I earned," I said out loud, the words sharper than I intended. "I worked for that, every shift, every tip, every burned finger." She didn't interrupt. I stared at the screen like it owed me something. "I asked her to say something," I murmured, my voice catching. Grandma's eyes softened. "When?" "Right before I left. I was in the kitchen, getting my coat. I said, 'Please don't let them do this. Please say something.' She looked at me, right in the eye, and said, 'Stop being dramatic. You'll survive.'" Grandma inhaled sharply, like she'd been punched in the stomach. "She said that?" I nodded. "And that's the last sentence I will ever accept from that woman." We sat in silence for a moment. Then she stood again and disappeared down the hall. When she returned, she carried another folder, thicker, worn at the edges. She opened it slowly, reverently. "This is everything your father gave me before he passed," she said. "Instructions, names, contacts. He didn't trust Darius from the start, and he knew. He knew your mother was weak when it came to him. I pulled the papers toward me and began to read. Each line confirmed what I already felt in my gut. They hadn't just left me out. They had stolen, lied, and rewritten history in real time. And I had let them, not anymore. As I organized the papers into piles, Grandma placed a cup of tea beside me. No milk, just strong and hot. "I'm not going back there," I said. "You're not," she confirmed. I tapped the photo of me and Dad on the table, next to the folder. "I think I know how to start." She watched me for a beat, then reached into the folder and pulled out one last item, a sealed envelope. She handed it to me with both hands. "Then you're ready to see what your father really left you." The contents inside weren't just sentimental, they were strategic, and they changed everything. I laid them out carefully across Grandma's kitchen table, each piece of paper weighted down at the corners with salt shakers and mason jars. Her house was old, and so were the vents. Any breeze would have scattered it all. I wasn't about to let any truth get blown away. It was morning now. December 26th. The storm had slowed to a quiet snowfall. You could hear it whispering against the windows like a tired apology. I hadn't slept much. Maybe an hour or two, max. But my mind was alert. Clear in a way it hadn't been in years. The will was real. Notarized. Stamped. Signed in blue ink, with my father's handwriting as distinct as ever. The document clearly stated that I was to receive his personal assets, what remained in his education fund, the Subaru, not exactly a fortune, but it was mine, and, this part hit hardest, his stake in the Evans Grill restaurant group, a 25% stake. That wasn't small. My breath caught when I saw the valuation. It had grown over the years, quietly, just like the way they'd buried me. Next to the will was the yellow sticky note with the credit union's name and the key still taped to it. I hadn't used that account in years. I thought it had been closed when Darius convinced Mom to streamline things. That word again. Streamline. The same one she'd used when she cleaned out my room, tossed Dad's records, and replaced everything with Pottery Barn neutrals. They hadn't forgotten me. They had edited me out, line by line, account by account. "I don't think they realized I'd still be here," I murmured. Grandma was sitting at the table across from me, one hand curled around a coffee mug, the other resting gently on her temple. "They hoped you wouldn't be," she said. "You were inconvenient to their story." I picked up one of the documents she'd saved, the ledger of transactions between the Evans Grill account and something called Evans Kane Holdings. The transfer amounts were too clean, too coordinated. It was laundering disguised as internal realignment. "Darius signed these," I said, showing her a copy. Grandma's eyes narrowed. "He's been calling himself a trustee for years. Your mother let him." "And she signed off on this?" I asked, though I didn't need to. Her signature was there in black ink. "She let it happen," Grandma said softly. "That's the part that always gets me. She didn't just sit back. She helped them build the machine." I looked at the last document, one I hadn't seen the night before. It was dated 3 weeks after their wedding. An updated will. My name was gone. Everything had been transferred into what they called the Isolde Family Trust, with Seraphine listed as the sole living beneficiary after both Darius and Isolde. I stared at it, feeling the familiar sting behind my ribs, like grief trying to find room inside a crowded chest. "She gave it to her," I whispered. Grandma didn't speak. She didn't need to. I sat back, rubbed my temples, and stared at the stack of papers that now proved something I'd felt but never thought I'd be able to explain, much less fight. But this wasn't about revenge, not anymore. It was about reclamation. I stood up, stretched my back, and walked over to Grandma's landline. "I'm calling legal aid," I said. She raised an eyebrow. "It's the day after Christmas, and I bet I'm not the only one who's calling." The woman who answered sounded like she'd been working holidays for years. I gave her a summary, short and sharp. Family trust, overwritten will, financial abuse, forged consent. She asked for my name. I gave it. "Caroline Quinn," I said. "I have proof. and I'm ready to file. We scheduled a callback for the next day. I hung up, grabbed my notepad, and wrote down every place I needed to contact. Step 1. Get a certified copy of the original will from the attorney Dad had used. He'd passed away 2 years ago, but the office was still active. Step 2. Contact the credit union, confirm the account under my name, and request transaction history. Step 3. File an inquiry with the Minnesota Department of Commerce about Evans Kane Holdings and their business registration. Step 4. Request my college transcript. If they drained my education fund, I wanted to know where that money was supposed to go. By noon, I had 4 folders created on Grandma's kitchen counter, each labeled with a Post-it and a paperclip. She watched me in silence for a long while. Then she said, "You're calm." "That scares me more than if you were screaming." I smiled, just slightly. "Good," I said. Around 2, I bundled up and walked down the block to the small post office near her neighborhood. I needed envelopes, stamps, a money order. The woman at the counter looked surprised to see me organizing paperwork 2 days after Christmas, but she didn't ask questions. On the way back, I passed my old high school. The snow had covered the front steps in a smooth sheet, untouched, almost ceremonial. For a second, I remembered what it felt like to be 16 and hopeful, like the world still had space for someone like me. By dusk, I'd sent 3 letters, made 2 more calls, and emailed a lawyer someone at Legal Aid had referred me to. I wasn't waiting anymore. That evening, after dinner, I told Grandma I wanted to take a walk. The wind had stilled. The sky was that kind of deep gray you only get in winter, just enough light to make the snow glow. I found myself 2 blocks from where I used to live. I hadn't meant to go there, but my legs carried me on instinct. From across the street, I could see the lights inside. Seraphine was on the couch, wearing the flannel pajamas I used to wear every Christmas Eve. They still fit her. Maybe Mom had washed them and passed them on like a family heirloom. Something borrowed. Something stolen. I didn't get closer. I didn't need to. Through the window, I saw Isolde standing by the sink, pouring tea into one of the mugs I'd painted for her in middle school. The kind that said, "Best Mom Ever," in chipped red letters. No one looked toward the window. No one noticed. And this time, that didn't hurt me. It cleared me. I whispered something, not for them to hear, but for me. Enjoy it while it lasts. And then I walked away. The storm outside was finally over, but what was coming next would be louder, sharper, and completely unstoppable. By the 1st of January, the roads were clear. The world had resumed its rhythm. Storefronts in downtown Minneapolis were back to flashing sale signs, coffee shops reopened, and people had returned to work still slightly hungover on hope, and I was done being polite. That morning, I took Grandma's old printer offline and booted up her desktop. I plugged in my USB, stacked the folders I had color-coded the night before, and opened a blank document. The subject line was simple: Request for Legal Review, Caroline Quinn. I addressed the email to Dad's former attorney. I wasn't sure if he still handled estate matters, but I figured his inbox would still be monitored. I attached PDFs of my father's original will, copies of the altered version that excluded me, bank records showing the educational trust transfer, and a notarized statement from Grandma detailing the timeline of events. I didn't accuse. I laid out facts. I copied in the Minnesota Office of Legal Affairs, a nonprofit family financial abuse advocate, my university's financial aid department, and a friend of a friend who had once worked as a paralegal and now ran a legal awareness blog. Then I added one more line at the bottom. I'm not seeking revenge, I'm seeking restoration, and I have everything I need to start. I hovered over the send button. Then I clicked. There was no dramatic swell of music, no flash of adrenaline, just the quiet relief that comes with action. Later that afternoon, I filed a complaint with the Minnesota Bar Association regarding breach of fiduciary duty, fraud, and financial abuse. It took 3 hours to fill out every form, scan every attachment, and write my statement, but I did it. No threats, no emotion, just documentation, I told myself. Grandma helped me double-check everything before I uploaded it. "You sure you're ready for what comes next?" she asked, not with fear, but with measured concern. I've been ready since they locked that door, I said. The next morning, the first ripple hit. Their lawyer replied to the forwarded email. We should speak, privately. That was the moment Darius panicked. From what I could piece together later through a string of mutual acquaintances, he stormed into the study, slammed his phone down, and accused Isolde of letting the girl stir up trouble. Isolde, predictably, blamed Seraphine for making everything public with that ridiculous photo. Seraphine rolled her eyes and said something like, "It's not my fault Caroline finally decided to grow a spine." None of them denied it. Not really. They were just mad it wasn't a secret anymore, and the timing couldn't have been better. The local women's civic group was hosting their annual New Year's charity brunch that Saturday, a semi-formal affair known more for gossip than giving, but well attended by the city's middle-class elite. Isolde was being honored for her service to women's empowerment. I heard about it through a flyer at the library. The moment I saw her name printed beneath the words, "Leadership and Family Values," something inside me clicked. I didn't ask permission. I ironed the one blazer I had left, twisted my hair into a low bun, and pinned on my mother's old brooch, the one Isolde used to wear before she decided it was too outdated. I tucked the folder under my arm, the one with every paper, every receipt, every truth. Grandma offered to drive, but I declined. This part, I needed to do alone. The brunch was held in a small community center near the river, the kind with faux crystal chandeliers and folding chairs dressed in white satin covers. Volunteers passed around coffee and lukewarm quiche. I walked in quietly and took a seat at the back. Isolde was radiant at the podium. Cream blouse, soft curls, that gentle, measured voice she used when she wanted people to believe she cared. Our daughters, she said, need examples of strength. They need to know that no matter the obstacles, women rise when they support one another. Family is where that begins. The room applauded. I stood. At first, no one noticed. Then a few heads turned. One woman whispered something, and suddenly the hush was spreading across the room like a wave pulling back from the shore before a crash. I stepped forward, steady, and approached the mic. "Funny," I said, loud and clear. "You locked yours in a car during a blizzard." Gasps. Audible, honest gasps. Isolde froze. I turned to the crowd. "My name is Caroline Quinn. I'm the daughter they don't talk about, the one who was erased from a family trust, whose father's will was rewritten, whose education fund was drained to fund their lifestyle." Darius had moved toward the side of the room, face pale, jaw tight. I held up the folder. "This," I said, flipping it open, "is the proof. You stole $50,000 that was legally mine. You lied, you manipulated, and you left me outside to freeze while you drank champagne." One of the event organizers rushed toward me, flustered, whispering something about decorum and "let's discuss this privately." I didn't shout, I didn't break. I handed the folder to the organizer and said, "Then read it, all of it, and then decide who deserves your applause." She asked me to leave, politely but firmly. Before I turned to go, a woman from the front row stood and said, "That was brave. It needed to be said." I nodded, then walked out. By the time I reached the sidewalk, my hands were shaking, but not from fear. A journalist caught up with me before I got to the car. He didn't ask questions, just handed me his card and said, "If you ever want to talk." That evening, as the sun dipped below the edge of the city skyline, my phone buzzed with a blocked number. I answered. A voice, a man's, low and unfamiliar, spoke. "Careful what you stir up. Families fall apart fast." Click. I stared at the screen for a second. Then I forwarded the number and message to my attorney with a note. "Anonymous threat. Please document. No emotion, just documentation." What they didn't realize was that I already had everything I needed to burn their paper-perfect world down. I thought that was the end, but healing has a longer memory than revenge. The day after I reclaimed my father's investment stake, Minneapolis felt sharper somehow. Not colder, the worst of the snow had come and gone, but cleaner, like something false had finally been scrubbed from the air. I'd spent the morning answering calls from legal offices, confirming receipt of the settlement agreement. The paper trail was real now, official. I had signed copies, court-sealed notices, and a release statement acknowledging the misconduct. It had taken weeks, but it happened. And yet, when I looked at myself in the mirror that afternoon, brushing my hair back behind my ears, I didn't feel triumphant. Not yet. Just steady. Then the story broke. It was a Tuesday when the local news site published the article, front page, under a soft-hitting human interest banner. Holiday scandal. Young woman locked out by step-family in blizzard. The headline alone made me pause. But the article, it wasn't soft. It was truth. Raw and unpolished. There was the Christmas photo, caption and all, screenshots of the financial statements. A direct quote from my statement at the charity event. You locked your daughter in a car during a snowstorm while you toasted yourselves. And Grandma's voice. They had interviewed her too. She had said simply, "You don't let your grandchild freeze unless you've already decided she doesn't matter." The article was shared over 12,000 times in 24 hours. I got emails from people I hadn't spoken to in years, old classmates, distant cousins, strangers. The messages piled up. Most were supportive, a few confused, some emotional. I was the Caroline in my house too. I didn't even realize financial abuse was a thing. That's not tough love, that's cruelty in a cashmere coat. But not one from my mother, not one from Darius, not even a blank text from Seraphine. That silence said more than any response could. By the end of the week, Darius's company had lost 3 contracts. 2 local businesses publicly withdrew their partnerships, citing ethical concerns. Isolde was quietly removed from her role on the civic board. Her scheduled speech at the annual Women's Equity Conference was canceled. The organizer had emailed me directly to say, "We stand with truth. Thank you for your courage." Seraphine deleted her Instagram account. All those curated brunches, the glittering gym selfies, the family-first captions, gone, poof, and still nothing from any of them. Not an apology, not a denial, just vacuum. The only sound came from my own breath as I stood once again in front of the house where it all started. It was mid-January, crisp but dry. Grandma waited in her car parked on the corner, idling with the heater running. I walked up the driveway slowly, dressed in a navy wool coat Grandma had tailored for me when I was 17. My lawyer walked next to me, briefcase in hand, every step firm and intentional. Darius answered the door. He didn't look older, just smaller. His smile didn't even attempt to rise. "Caroline," he said, stepping aside. Inside, the house felt cold, not in temperature, but in spirit. The energy was off. Too quiet, too tidy, like someone had tried to scrub the memories off the walls but didn't quite succeed. Isolde stood near the fireplace. She didn't wear makeup. Her sweater sleeves were stretched at the wrist, like she'd been tugging on them. "We were just overwhelmed," she said. I turned to her, held her gaze. "You weren't overwhelmed. You were in control. That's what makes it worse." She blinked fast but said nothing else. I handed Darius the envelope. Legal notice, settlement acknowledgement, termination of their hold on any of my father's assets, a firm line drawn under all of it. "This house is no longer yours to weaponize," I said. He didn't argue, just stared at the papers in his hand. We walked through the house one final time, not as daughter and father figure, not as family, just 2 legal entities resolving unfinished business. When I stepped into my old bedroom, I expected to feel something, nostalgia, sadness, even grief, but it was just empty, stripped of posters, rugs, and books. It had been converted into an office, then into a guest room. Now, it was just a blank shell. I touched the doorknob, the same one that once turned to lock me out, and I whispered, "This door closes both ways now." We left. Later that night, I sat on the edge of Grandma's couch, tea in hand, wrapped in a fleece blanket that smelled like lavender. Snow began to fall again, not a storm, not a warning, just flakes, soft, slow, and harmless, the kind that covered everything without a sound. I didn't look back. I had my keys, and I had my name. Sometimes, the hardest part isn't fighting to be heard. It's choosing what you do with the silence afterward. 2 months had passed since I walked away from the house with legal victory in one hand and my identity in the other. Late February now, the sidewalks in Slavic Village were still streaked with old salt lines, and the air had that sleepy Midwest hush, like winter wasn't over, but no one had the energy to argue with it anymore. The cafe opened quietly on a Thursday. We didn't make announcements, no ribbon cutting. No PR photos, just a hand-painted wooden sign above the door that read, Red Wool. It was a tribute, of course, though not many people asked. The few who did got the short version. My dad had a red blanket. I always felt safe under it. That was enough. We kept it simple. 4 mismatched tables, a bookshelf filled with donated paperbacks, and a pay-what-you-can corkboard. Grandma brewed the coffee. I baked the scones. The rest took care of itself. By the second week, regulars started to appear. Mr. Hanley from the barber shop down the street came in every morning at 7:15 and read the same mystery novel in the corner booth. Nora, a widowed math teacher, brought in a tray of lemon bars once a week, just because. And then there were the kids, quiet, hoodie-wearing teens who came in after school, didn't always buy anything, but always left calmer than when they arrived. No one asked too many questions. Maybe that was the magic of Red Wool. We weren't there to fix anyone. Just to remind them they hadn't been forgotten. One afternoon, I was behind the counter restocking tea tins when a girl came in, early 20s, wearing glasses too big for her face and a coat 2 sizes too small. She ordered a chamomile and then hovered near the register, uncertain. "You're the girl from that article, right?" she asked softly. I didn't flinch. I got that question sometimes, not every day, but enough. I gave a small nod. She looked down at her drink, then back at me. "You were really brave." I smiled, not wide, not forced, just enough to acknowledge the moment. No, I was just tired of pretending. That seemed to sit with her. She gave a tiny, grateful smile, then walked to the corner with her tea, slid into the window seat, and pulled out a spiral notebook. I returned to the sink, but her words lingered. Brave. I never felt brave. I felt broken, then angry, then quiet, but never brave. I didn't want to win, not in the way people thought. I didn't need applause or to prove them wrong. I just wanted to stop losing, to stop erasing myself so that other people could stay comfortable. Grandma always said the world prefers quiet women, but even she had to admit quiet never saved me. Later that evening, after we locked the front door and flipped the sign to closed, I walked to the back room, pulled open the old desk drawer, and took out the letter I'd written months ago, but never sent. The envelope was still sealed, yellowed slightly at the corners. The handwriting on the front just said, Mom. It wasn't an angry letter, not even a confrontational one. There were no accusations, no lists of wrongs. It started simply, You broke me. And it ended with, I had to become someone new just to hold myself upright. I never asked her why. I realized somewhere along the way that even if she answered, it wouldn't undo the damage. The need for an explanation had faded. The need for a witness had not. I slipped the envelope back into the drawer and locked it. Not to forget, but to finally stop waiting for her to say sorry. We had customers the next morning, more than expected. I didn't have time to think about letters or court documents or what Darius was doing in Florida or if Seraphine still worked that boutique job she hated. They weren't part of this new rhythm, this new room I had built. At noon, I brewed tea for Grandma. She was knitting by the front window, needles clicking softly, eyes tracking the slow drift of snow outside. Almost lunchtime, I said, placing the cup beside her. She didn't answer immediately, just gave me a look, the kind that held pride without words. You've made something here, she said finally. Something good, I nodded. I just wanted one warm room, I replied. And I had it. Later that evening, I flipped the sign again, from closed to open. The snow had returned, floating lazily under the glow of the streetlight. But it didn't feel threatening anymore. I stood by the front door for a moment, hand still on the knob, watching the flakes fall. The door was unlocked. The warmth behind me was real. I never got back the home I lost, but I built something else, something better, not for them, for me. And this time, I'm not outside. I'm holding the keys. Sometimes the people who should protect us the most are the very ones who tear us down. But healing isn't about revenge. It's about reclaiming your voice, your worth, and your place in the world. What would you do if your own family shut you out, not just from their home, but from the life you were meant to have? If this story moved you or reminded you of something you've been through, share your thoughts in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe for more powerful, real-life stories just like this one.